This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Mikael Coveel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Mikael Stenbom. Mikael is the CEO and founder of RPM, which is a advisory consulting firm in Sweden. They advise or consult or manage over $3.5 billion. Mikael has had tremendous experience in understanding not only strategy, which is sort of my world, but also the money management side of the CTA managed futures world. I hope you enjoy our conversation. So I have to tell you, so I was watching your Opalesque video and your interview, and I was thinking to myself, well, why have I not talked to this Swedish fund manager before? It sounds like he's been running in a parallel world to me.
Yeah. You know, we have been a little... during our first 20 years of existence, we had a business model that was more like white labeling. So investment banks and others, pension funds, they sort of outsourced the construction and ongoing management of multi-manager portfolios to us. So we've had a business model that has been one of, white labeling. So we haven't been all that visible in the industry, apart, of course, CTAs. I think we're fairly well known with CTAs. But after the crisis, 2008, we decided to complement our business model by constructing and marketing products under our own name. And one of them is, of course, this evolving CTA fund that you got some material of.
So let me jump back, though, to your early time. So econ background in the Navy. So when was the first moment? So here you are in the CTA managed futures space, the trend space, with significant billions of assets that you're either consulting on or managing. So if you had to look back in time, when was that first light bulb moment that you had where you said, wow, hold on, these guys, even the older time CTAs, the Bill Dunns, the newer guys like David Harding, Aspect, when was the first point in time where you saw this style of investing, trading, and had that light bulb moment and said, hey, hold on, this is not the kind of stuff they were really throwing at us in school?
When was that? I think that was pretty early. You see, I am an economist by training. I majored in economics at the Stockholm School of Economics after the Navy. And during my studies, I was very skeptical to the current sort of paradigm in economics, which basically can be summarized with the words physics envy. Economists or theoreticians have in the economics discipline have, for a number of decades, they had the idea that economics and finance was governed by some natural laws that they were sort of discovering. I subscribe much more to the Austrian school, Schumpeter, Hayek, that mean that economics is just applied sociology, one part of sociology. So to me, it was somewhat of a relief, I would say, to encounter the first CTAs, because they were very, very explicit in saying that, we are exploiting, we are making money from inefficiencies using the sort of the EMH paradigm. Using efficiency, we are making money from efficiencies that arise from greed and fear and human nature in general. So there wasn't like an eureka moment. It was more like, I can relate to these guys because they live in reality and not in some kind of academic ivory tower.
I was just curious about your early kind of moments where, and I guess from that, once you saw that started to build some passion, like, hey, I want to go in this direction.
Yeah, exactly. Now I entered the industry more by luck, I must say. But once in there, I have never thought of leaving it because I find also CTAs and the individuals in this industry are often quite fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's interesting. You mentioned the Austrian school and Mises and whatnot. I find that thread runs through many of the CTA type traders as well.
I think so. They don't give much for rational expectation stuff,
Of course, not much for efficient markets either. Let's you brought it up right when we first started talking, and you were talking about 2008 and how you were rebranding your firm. Let me ask though, as we think back to 2008, we're talking 5 years ago. Clearly, equities have gone straight up. For whatever reason, that can be debated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, though, that we're starting to see that same kind of belief in markets going straight up that we saw in the late 90s, and perhaps some of the benefits? And I'm going to get you to describe what you would define crisis alpha as, but that some of the benefits of crisis alpha are they harder for you to sell to clients today, or are people still willing to listen even though we're 5 years removed from the crisis?
It is, of course, a very difficult market. I think it's difficult to market hedge funds in general. It's difficult to market managed futures in particular. However, we are encountering an increasing number of what I would say representatives of smart money, being family offices, independent wealth managers, and similar, that are becoming more and more concerned about the development of equity markets, and also, of course, the bond market. And they are gradually, I think, positioning themselves in managed futures again in order to have this protection against a potential severe correction in the equity markets. It is, I think, when we think of managed futures returns or CTA returns, we divide them into three components. That's one perspective, and I think it is a practical perspective. We have the crisis alpha, we have the risk premium. In our case, that risk premium unlevered is about 2% per annum, and we have the risk-free interest rates. The problem that we have seen after 2008 is that, of course, we haven't had any crisis alpha moments because markets have, for the most part, gone more or less straight up. We haven't had a risk-free interest rate to talk of. Sometimes that have even been negative. And the third part, the risk premium has been extremely low, if maybe negative. And we thought about the reasons for that. And one sort of high-level explanation of it is the fact that speculation is all about risk transfer. You take on a risk that someone else doesn't want to bear, and in order for you to do that as a CTA or speculator, you need to get paid over time. And that is the risk premium, or the insurance premium that you collect. Now, the problem is that the world's central banks and politicians have acted as risk takers, as speculators, without a profit motive or without a profit incentive. So that has driven the risk premium down to zero or even negative. And I think that is the explanation behind the mediocre returns from the industry in recent years. But hopefully, it seems like the markets are getting slowly back to normal. Good news are good news, and not the other way around, as it's been for a year or so. We have left the risk-on, risk-off environment. It seems that markets have adjusted to the fact that the quantitative easing will not go on forever, that the tapering will occur, and markets are, seems ready to take care of themselves again.
Let me jump in and ask you about your definition of smart money, because you mentioned, is smart money ultimately to you just less decision makers?
I define smart money as investors, and I'm talking about not physical persons, but legal persons that are characterized by a very short organizational distance between the actual owner of the capital and the decision maker. Mm-hmm. Meaning that there are these are organizations or companies or whatever that are less politically infected, if you understand what I mean. The political dimension of their investment decision are quite limited. If you look at here in Europe, larger pension funds and insurance companies and similar, you would find that there are layers and layers of organizational bodies and.
That's the nice thing to call them.
Yeah.
There's things off record. We might call them other things.
Smart money is money where that they have to sound a bit academic, but they have very simple utility functions. My task is to maximize risk-adjusted return for the guy or the woman or whatever who owns the money. So I do that to the best of my abilities, right? And they are not afraid of making controversial decisions or innovative decisions. While a manager in a large pension fund typically has a much more complicated utility function or objective function, if you like, that there are lots of different conditions that need to be satisfied. Not only the risk-adjusted rate of return, but also the political risk, the media risk, the career risk, all the risks that are involved in not giving my superior, if it be a CIO or investment board or board of directors, or not telling them what they want to hear. So there's a lot of, I think I mentioned in one of these Opaleski interviews, there's a lot of second guessing going on in large investment organizations, which lead to not rational decisions in a strict risk-adjusted return sense, maybe rational decision given their very complicated utility function. Yeah. But certainly not. They will certainly not maximize the risk-adjusted return for their peers, the owners of the capital, be it the pensioners or whatever.
So let's say a new client comes to your firm. By bits of research, they're well respected. They are smart money by your definition, but they're not familiar with systematic styles of trading, responsive styles of trading to market movements. A la the AHL, the Winton, the Aspect. That person sits down with you, that group sits down with you, and you are attempting to explain for the first time to a very smart individual who can make an allocation, somebody that you want to work with. How do you go about explaining for the first time this systematic style of trading, this responsive trend trading that ultimately delivers the benefits to the CTAs and in the managed future space?
Right. What depending on their sort of pre-understanding, I would typically start in the crisis alpha end, and I would use the Andrew Lowe's adaptive market hypothesis as the kind of framework in order to put this. Andrew Lowe at MIT, he put forth this adaptive market hypothesis, was it 10 years ago or so, a little more perhaps, where he likens the economy to ecological system, like evolutionary theory. And he basically says that markets are for the most part efficient, but from time to time due to changes in the market ecology, markets become extremely inefficient. The market participants that can survive in the changing market ecology or changing environment, like we had 2008, are the ones that are most suited to or most able to adapt to the new conditions. Just like evolutionary theory, adaptability is sort of the key word. Now, CTAs are probably the only species, in the market ecology that have a more or less unrestrained ability for adaptation, given the fact that they, trading in the liquid markets, they can go long, they can go short, there are no asymmetries, there are no liquidity issues, etc., 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 and they are perfectly opportunistic and all that. And while traditional players and CTAs are systematic, which reduces or eliminates the impact of all behavioral biases that we suffer. Traditional players, they have all the behavioral biases, of course, and there's a long list of them, and they become especially pronounced in terms of market crisis. But they also suffer from a lot of other restrictions, institutional restrictions. They can't short, or they can't buy, go long commodities or trade commodities at all. There are lots of limitations. They have VAR limits, they have drawdown limits, etc. They have regulatory restrictions put on them, which inhibits their ability to adapt. And in addition, you have the market issues or market functionality issues, where they suffer, credit issues, there are liquidity issues, there are asymmetries in long short, stuff like that. So I explain that. And essentially I say, well, if you believe in the efficient market hypothesis, okay, CTAs make money by providing liquidity and hedging opportunities. That's 2% per annum. The rest is risk-free and the ability to adapt in changing market environments. And most people understand that. And then you can show that graphically when they see that CTA's profit sources in terms of market distress are not at all limited to being short equities. I can often see the light go on, aha, now we understand. Okay.
There's got to be a fun, besides the business side of you, there's got to be a kind of a fun, satisfying feeling when you bring forward to clients that, like I've said, perhaps are very experienced, they've had great successes in their life, but they're not familiar with this. And then you educate them. That's kind of got to be a satisfying feeling to see those light bulb moments go off.
Oh, yeah, sure, it is. But the problem is that, when you, I had one of these moments just a couple of weeks ago with a smart money investor here in the Nordic countries that immediately got it right. Yes, I understand. Good, fine. But the saddening thing is that when you meet a typical large pension fund or, politically infected investor, they say the same thing. Wonderful, I understand. It's correct.
Politically infected. I like that. Can I use that? I'll have to source you on that. Politically infected.
Sure. But, they don't act upon it.
Yeah.
Intellectually, it's very hard to argue against this. It doesn't matter. It's not an intellectual thing. It is all a political, emotional thing.
Before I jump in, I want to move into your current world and how you have gone about kind of what I've seen you call a 6-step structured investment process, and the idea of how you select traders for your funds, this almost kind of a life cycle. But there was one thing that I wanted to bring up that I think you became exposed to early in your career, and I've not seen other people really talk about this in the space, which is you seemingly had a lot of Japanese clients.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen?
Well, it's a long story basically, but it started in the 90s when we got a risk management or risk monitoring mandate for Nikko Securities. They happened to have a representation in Luxembourg, and someone happened to know this guy and knew that we had some pretty nice risk monitoring and risk management systems that that Nikko Securities could benefit from. And then we developed a relationship with a Japanese gentleman called Ted Oimai, whom you probably have met at some point, from alternative investment products in Tokyo. He represented Cargill Investor Services and PerTrack and RPM in Tokyo. And then we kind of got a name for ourselves in the Japanese institutional market, and we got a number of mandates. One thing led to another. But there is another interesting aspect of this, and I feel that it is my clear feeling that there is some kind of cultural compatibility between people from the Nordic countries, especially Sweden and Finland, and the Japanese.
Mm. You mean things are very engineered well and everything's clean?
Yeah, very clean, very detail oriented.
Yes.
It's clear, diligent. And also the way we are. Well, it's hard to put your finger on it, what exactly it is. But at some level, how different we may be, or how different our respective cultures may be, there's on some level there is an excellent fit. Mm. Maybe because we're very quiet and humble in this country.
So you're basically saying that the Japanese businessmen in a room full of crazy traders in New York City, it's just not the best fit sometimes, is what you're saying.
I'm not saying that. Maybe a great fit, but the only thing I'm saying is that I think that we relate quite well in business. Of course, there are aspects. There are always cultural differences that we have to learn and understand. But in general, I found it much easier, or I wouldn't say easier, but much more natural to do business in Japan than, for instance, in France, which has an entirely different business culture.
Well, that's an interesting nugget. I had seen that early on, and I was thinking to myself, just in my own world, how limited my involvement with Japan has been compared to some other countries. And I just was, when I saw that with you, I was, well, that's interesting. What's the story there? So that was my questioning, was coming from that, and you actually spurred something on in my thinking that I had never pondered before. So that's quite interesting.
There is one other aspect also to it, and that is that one of our senior guys here, Magnus Kottenauer, who runs our business development, he actually lived in Japan when he went to high school. So he went to the American high school in Tokyo, particularly for 3-4 years. Speaks some Japanese, understands the Japanese culture, is married to a Japanese woman, and of course that helps a lot. Overcoming any cultural differences.
Sure. So if I was to describe your business today, I've seen you use the term CTA specialist, and from what I understand, that is two different aspects of business. This multi-manager CTA portfolio, which, am I correct to call it a fund of funds, essentially?
Oh, yeah. A fund of managed accounts.
Okay.
We do not do fund investment. So, only managed account investments.
And number two would be third-party risk monitoring, which I'm sure can be specific to that particular client and their particular need. So that's your big picture, your business. Now, I think one of the interesting things I saw that you have been working on, and it's not necessarily strategy only focused, but it's more about this life cycle of CTAs. And I think it's interesting how you have taken other principles that might have been applied in other areas of the business world and saying, hey, hold on, maybe this fits well in the world of CTAs that I put into my portfolio.
Yeah, and it fits well into the world of hedge funds in general. You have been long enough in the industry to remember a lot of the big names that just gradually disappeared from the scene. Mint, John Henry, Chesapeake, the big guys that used to be the big guys 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Now we have different names. We were a little bit, maybe if we are going to be self-critical, we invested with Winton, Aspect, Transtrend, and a lot of these, still extremely successful traders in terms of assets quite early on, and we were, in the late 90s, and we were quite pleased with their performance. And maybe we got a little bit lazy, that we forgot where we should create value, and that is, of course, identifying the new talent and next generation. But we did a lot of research. We spent 2 years basically doing research on how a successful trader goes through time. So we did a lot of database cleaning and cleaning databases from graveyard and survivorship biases and stuff like that. And we found quickly that what we see today with the deteriorating absolute and, more importantly, relative returns from the very large CTAs has always been the case. The only difference is that they change names. Same principles apply and have always applied. There is no difference today or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So then we were quite comfortable in the fact that the corporate life cycle seems to be as true for CDA as for any company, be it a service company or a producing company. There seems to be a sort of a life cycle, a certain rhythm to it. Now there are, of course, there are companies that rejuvenate. I used to take Apple as an example of the typical corporate life cycle.
They were left for dead.
Yeah, they were left for dead, and then they rejuvenated themselves, which was and that happens also in the CTA world, but not that often. Most when a manager has peaked, in terms of assets and his historical performance, they typically never come back. Although it happens. Maybe Campbell is doing it right now. Maybe they are in a rejuvenation phase. Possible. Now, so what we did then is simply to study all CDAs ever, and in order to establish or to be able to categorize CTAs. Or condition them on their lives, where they are in their life cycle, using non-performance data. And we separate them between the different or the major strategies: trend following, fundamentally driven trading, and short-term trading, because they have different sensitivities to both assets and to age. And then we could define what constitutes the emerging manager space, defined by age and assets, and what constitutes the evolving manager space, defined again by age and assets, and conditioned on strategy. So then we have four dynamic universes of CTAs. So at every point in time, we know who are the CDAs that are evolving right now. Currently, there are about 80 of them, 80 evolving CDAs, right, that we simply prioritize. And we focus our due diligence on those managers. And we select the ones we feel are the best, but also that are the most complementary to each other. Because about half of the overperformance of the evolving CTAs over the large cap CTAs arise from the superb diversification benefits in that particular space. The pairwise correlation between all evolving managers is much lower than the pairwise correlation between all the large cap managers. So it's a pretty straightforward and simple, I would say. There's no rocket science to this. It's just systematic, disciplined, focused on this particular space.
Let me interject and ask, in my world, I've always been fixated on a particular strategy in the CTA universe. In your world, you have to be fixated on the strategies and then also the businesses. And I've often thought about and theorized about the peaks and valleys of some businesses in the CTA space. And I wonder your opinion on this. I sometimes look at it and say that it's a business where men and women can make so much money that in some ways and there's so few people often involved ultimately in the hierarchy of many of these CTAs, and the wealth that can be made is so dramatic. I sometimes wonder if you just dial it back a little naturally. It's human nature. If you go from not being worth a lot to being worth money that your kids can use centuries from now, you wonder if that sometimes plays a role in the having that hunger in the gut to keep evolving.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think so. But it's very difficult to separate, the various influences, because if you take a very successful CTA, an individual that goes through life, he seldom makes that much money before he's been trading or been in the business for, say, up around 10 years. Some can make it after 5 to 7 years, but most after, it takes a couple of years to get there. And during those years, these individuals, they do change, and not only because they make money. They change because they grow older, and they change because they have kids, or the kids grow up. There are lots of stuff going on in any person's life that affect your motivations and your incentives and your priorities in life. And it's very difficult to separate exactly what is it that, it's hard to say, well, he's earned so much money, so he ain't hungry no more, maybe, but there may also be other influences that are quite natural.
But the bottom line is that there is a life cycle issue that you have kind of put your finger on.
Yeah, and I think that the whole concept, the whole idea of time is people have not spent enough time on that. When you look at any business or or a trading system or any business, it is we have to relate that. We have to put in a time parameter, because that affects the human. Most humans live, say, in the Western world, live until they are 80, right? But between 70 and 80, most people don't work. They take it easy, and most people study until they are 25, perhaps even when they are 30. The thing is that you only have basically 30, max 40 years of really active work, and that is sort of that time span affects the way a business is run and the business is developed. Did this sound a little, muddy?
No. I think it's a great perspective, because it's something it's not core to my world, but I think about it often in terms of the ups and downs, because sometimes I think people will just make a snap judgment. They think they know what's going on, but I think you are systematically breaking it down and saying, hey, hold on, there's something more here than just a quick snap judgment.
Yeah. So, I guess the bottom line is that you have to realize, and you have to account for, that nothing is constant in this world, and nothing is things change. They always change. The only sure thing is death and taxes, of course.
Well, let me shift gears on you. Something. Hopefully you would find. I don't want to use the word fun, but hopefully you'll try with me. So you have clearly in your space, and not unlike my world, you've had a chance to meet a lot of people in the CTA space. You've had a chance to spend a lot of time with a lot of great traders that have had tremendous success, and I'm sure you've drawn opinions, and good and bad. But I don't really care about the bad opinions today. I'm more interested if you'd be willing to offer. I can offer names, but there might even be names that I'm not aware of. Or if you just want to go more general and talk about the reason why you think some CTAs have had tremendous success on the personal side. What is it about them as people? We talked early on about perhaps many of them relate to the Austrian way, but what is it about some of these entrepreneurs that have just stood outside the system and created these immense business? What is it?
I think in general, I would say that the typical CDA is not the very social guy, the guy, or what is the English word? They are outsiders. They have always been outsiders.
Mavericks,
outsiders. They are, they are not the guys who, follow the trend, go with or take the easy way out, They've always been the odd guy, or the odd maverick. Of course, some of them are extremely intelligent. See stuff, understand stuff that others don't. I think perhaps that this maverick thing with them has also created a lot of, unleashed a lot of energy with them. They have they want to make it. They want to show that it is possible to be successful without wearing a navy blue suit and expensive shoes and work for Morgan Stanley. Well,
it's dramatic. It's dramatically different too, because I think that's for a lot of people, and I know our conversation's kind of a tangent here, but for many people that don't know about trading, and even very successful people, they might think of Morgan Stanley, they might think of Goldman Sachs, but there's quite a big difference between sitting at a desk at Goldman Sachs and doing what David Harding has done.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, but I don't think that distinction is often, it can get blurred. I think you and I appreciate the entrepreneurial, the risk-taking aspect of it. Whereas, yes, early on, you might have to fight like crazy to get a job at Goldman Sachs, and you've got one of the golden Willy Wonka tickets, and you're going to make guaranteed money. But guess what? You're still working for the man. Whereas a guy like David Harding creates his business. He is the man.
Yeah, he is the man. And it's extremely impressive. And, a few of them, like David Harding, and he is perhaps one of the best example, also has the ability, to not only is he maverick and can think, he has his own head, his own ideas, and clever enough, but he also got the ability to build an organization, to attract talented individuals, to lead them in a positive and efficient manner. And be able to hold it all together for decades, and that is typically not what what an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is excellent at finding the new idea, pursue it, and succeed it, and then just leave it for the next thing. But David Harding and a few other has actually been extremely successful with an entrepreneurial spirit, building and managing and maintaining and developing what is now a financial institution. So that is very, very, very impressive.
I think people enjoy these types of conversations. I think when they get a chance to listen in and hear perspectives like yours, hear how your business has evolved, your perspective about the industry. For those that are awake, for those that are grounded and want to learn, I just love having these conversations. So, I appreciate you spending the time with me today, and hopefully we can talk again in the future. And like I said, for me, it's always learning something new. I think the thing that I will always remember about our conversation today is just the connection with Japan. Other people will probably think of other things, but for me, to think about the commonality in these two very disparate cultures is quite interesting. Mm-hmm. For me, I started this in January of 2012, and I think it's somewhere close to 1.5 million listens. And people just they like having the long form interview where they can really hear somebody think. It's not necessarily just to hear you talk. They want to hear you think.
Well, that's a scarce thing these days, I would say. It's, in this world where people are, asked to give opinions on anything in 5 seconds, it's very refreshing to hear people reason and think and discuss. So I understand that there's a demand for that.
Well, I think there is a demand. I don't know how ultimately large it is. The masses, what I often call a sheeple, they're always going to want to turn on Bloomberg and CNBC and listen to some guy give 5 seconds of mumbo jumbo, and they're going to turn the TV off and be happy. But I maintain there still is a segment of the population out there that's significantly quality that does like to hear conversations and like to hear views from people like yourself.
Yeah. All right.
Hopefully we can chat again in the future, and hopefully after we have our next crisis alpha moment, when we can all look back and just in a very, I will defer to your humble Nordic roots, and you can just in a very humble way. Well, we were talking about this recently, and we kind of were advising clients that you might be aware. So, anyways, we can always circle back on that.
Okay. Well, nice talking to you.
Absolutely.
And are you going back to the U.S. soon, or
I am.
With the States?
No, I'm going back to the States in December, and I will come back to Asia in January or February. And I don't know if it'll necessarily be Vietnam, but it could be Singapore. Singapore definitely has some enthusiasm for things that go on in my world, so it's quite nice to be over there.
Yeah, I just came back from Singapore. I have a son who studies physics, engineering physics at the National University of Singapore. So when we were in Vietnam, we went over to visit him for a couple of days. I was very impressed by the university.
I've not seen the universities there. Have you? When was the first time you were in Singapore? So you've seen the growth over the years.
Oh yeah, it was many years. First time must have been say 96, 97, and I traveled there reasonably frequently just after the turn of the millennium. Then I haven't been there for like 6 years, and it was like, wow, what's this? I can, this whole new Marina Bay area. That didn't exist when I started to go to Singapore. This huge hotel, Marina Bay Sands Hotel. They have a structure on top of it that looks like a ship with a swimming pool. It's incredible.
There's a documentary online talking about how they built that. It's phenomenal. I'll share one quick fun story with you, and I'm surely not being cocky as I say this, and it says more about Singapore than it says about me. But I hopped in a taxi in Singapore, and I started talking with the taxi driver, just whatever crazy talk you talk with taxi drivers about the weather, whatever. He looks in the rearview mirror, and I'm clearly, a few people have read my books, but I'm not Lady Gaga or anything. He looks through the rearview mirror and says, "I know you," names my name, and says and names the 2 books of mine that he's read. Now, like I said, I don't think that says as much about me as it says about Singapore, that the taxi drivers are reading books about alternative investment strategies. That's pretty cool, huh? About Singapore, at least.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's cool. It's cool for me for the moment, but I walk away really with that feeling of like, wow, this place, this is something special. So,
It's quite unique.
Yeah.
Quite unique. If you want to have a tip on a very interesting hotel, not the standard luxury ones, more of a design, cool place. If you check out an hotel called Wanderlust, it's a design hotel in Little India, or close to Little India, in Singapore. Very cool, excellent French restaurants, and good location too. If you're bored with the the standard luxury places,
and that can happen, as everyone that's done that knows, for sure. I was actually in Little India for the first time on my trip there last week. It's a fun little area.
Well, they call it Bugis, right? Bugis.
Do they?
Yeah, I think they call the area Bugis. Yeah. All right.
Well, listen, we'll talk after our Crisis Alpha moment. An appointment has been made.
Nice talking to you.
Take care. See ya. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.